My brother was always the golden child. Parents paid his bills and cleared his debts. At Christmas, he found out I built a $25 million company on my own and broke down, demanding $15 million while mom screamed that I stole his future. My name is Sam. I'm 32 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my family made it perfectly clear who the star of the show was. It wasn't me. My older brother, Daniel, was the golden child from the day he was born. If he sneezed, my parents acted like he needed a team of doctors. When I was 9, I fell out of a tree and broke my arm, and I got a lecture about being careless and how hospital bills don't pay for themselves. That was the rhythm of our home. Daniel shone, and I was supposed to be content in his shadow. The favoritism was never subtle. When Daniel went to college, my parents didn't just cover his tuition. They paid for his downtown apartment and gave him grocery money that always seemed to turn into new sneakers and concert tickets. Meanwhile, I was working night shifts at a diner just to afford community college. If I ever asked for help, I'd get the same line: "Sam, you need to learn responsibility." And I learned it, all right. I learned the weight of every hard-earned dollar, the exhaustion of every night shift, the frustration of skipping meals to pay for textbooks. It built a shell around me, made me tough. But when Daniel racked up thousands in credit card debt from a pyramid scheme, my parents swooped in like superheroes and paid it all off. The message was crystal clear: Daniel's mistakes were just bumps in the road. Mine would have been proof that I was a failure. By the time he turned 25, they helped him with a down payment on a house in the suburbs. When I turned 25, they sent me a card with a $20 bill inside, signed, "Don't spend it all at once." I remember laughing, but it was a bitter, hollow sound. I gave up on expecting fairness a long time ago. Instead, I learned to pour all that resentment into work. I kept my head down, took every odd job I could find, studied business at night, and started experimenting with side hustles. First, it was reselling electronics. Then, I moved on to small e-commerce ventures. After a lot of trial and error, I finally hit on something real. I built a logistics software company from nothing, pouring every bit of my energy into it, scaling it up quietly, while my parents bragged about Daniel's latest achievements to anyone who would listen. They had no idea what I was doing because they never once asked. Years went by. My company, after countless long nights and setbacks, was acquired. The deal closed last year. The number was $25 million. To be honest, I didn't celebrate the way people might imagine. There was no champagne or fancy vacation. I just sat in my small apartment, staring at the signed paperwork, and thought, so this is what it feels like to finally win. I didn't tell anyone in my family. I suppose a part of me wanted to see how long it would take for them to notice that. Maybe, just maybe, the other son had done something worthwhile. That brings us to this past Christmas dinner. The family house was decked out like something from a Hallmark movie. Mom had insisted on her traditional feast: turkey, ham, casseroles, pies, the whole works. Daniel, of course, made his entrance like a king, with his wife and 2 kids trailing behind him. A new watch glittered on his wrist, no doubt another gift my parents had quietly funded. My mom fussed over him. My dad brought out his favorite scotch. The whole evening started exactly like every holiday before it, with me as an afterthought. I sat there quietly, passing plates, half listening as Daniel complained about how stressful his job was, and how unfair it was that his annual bonus wasn't bigger. The irony was so thick I almost choked. Then, out of nowhere, my aunt, the one person I'd confided in months earlier, turned to me and asked, perfectly casually, "Sam, how's the company doing? Last I heard, you closed that big deal." The table went dead silent. Fort stopped halfway to mouths. My mom blinked, as if she couldn't process the words. Daniel tilted his head, smirking like he thought it was a joke. "What deal?" he asked. I took a slow breath, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I sold my company last year." Dad frowned. "Company? What company?" "The logistics software I've been building for the last 10 years, I explained, my voice steady even though I was bracing for impact. "It was acquired for $25 million. It was like all the air had been sucked out of the room. My aunt gave me a small, proud smile, but my mom's face twisted like I just confessed to a crime. Daniel went pale, then flushed a deep red. His fork clattered onto his plate. 25 what? He stammered. Million. I repeated. It was a grenade. And I just pulled the pin. My parents stared at me, then at Daniel, then back at me. And that's when Daniel started shaking his head, letting out a disbelieving laugh that cracked in the middle. "That's not fair," he said, his voice rising. "That's not fair. You can't have that kind of money." I sat there, frozen, as he shoved his chair back so hard it nearly fell over. He stood up, trembling, and then, I'm not exaggerating, he collapsed onto the floor. He was sobbing, full-on, shoulder-shaking sobs, like a toddler who'd been told Christmas was canceled. His wife rushed over, confused, but he just kept crying. "It's not fair. I've done everything right, and he gets 25 million. Then came the words I'll never forget. "You need to give me at least 15 million. I deserve it." I blinked, sure I had misheard, but before I could form a response, my mom slammed her hands on the table and screamed at me. "You stole his future. You robbed your brother. How dare you keep this from us?" The room erupted into chaos. Daniel was on the floor, begging through his tears. My mom was pointing a finger at me like I'd committed an unforgivable sin. My dad just sat there, stunned, muttering under his breath. I didn't say another word. I just watched it all unfold, feeling a strange mix of anger, vindication, and utter disbelief. For years, I'd been invisible. Now that they could finally see me, they were accusing me of theft for building something they'd never once cared about. I realized then that this wasn't just another forgettable holiday. It was the start of something much bigger. And as my brother cried on the floor, demanding millions, I knew, deep down, that I wasn't done yet. When I replay that Christmas dinner in my head, it feels surreal. You'd think if your child told you they'd accomplished something huge, completely on their own, you'd feel a flicker of pride. Even if things were complicated, you might at least manage a well done. But that's not what I got. Not even close. After I dropped the news about the money, the atmosphere in the room changed in a way that's hard to describe. That warm, predictable family feeling just vanished. My aunt tried to lighten the mood by joking about me being the secret millionaire, but nobody else was laughing. My mom's face was pinched, like she'd bitten into a lemon. Daniel stayed on the floor for a good 10 minutes, crying like his world had ended. When he finally got up, he wouldn't look at me. He just sat there, red-eyed and trembling, muttering about how unfair life was. His wife was dabbing his forehead with a napkin like he was in a hospital drama. My dad poured himself another scotch, downed it in one go, and stared at the table. "Sam," my mom said finally, her voice sharp enough to slice through the tension. "Why didn't you tell us? Why would you hide this from your family?" Every eye was on me. I put my fork down. Because nobody ever asked. That should have been enough. But she slammed her palm on the table again, making the dishes rattle. "Don't you be smart with me. You think this is a game? You think we wouldn't care?" I looked her straight in the eye and, for the first time in years, was completely blunt. "You never cared about anything I was doing. Every time I tried to share something with you, you brushed it off. You only ever had eyes for Daniel." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. My mom's lips pressed into a thin line. My dad sighed heavily, and Daniel finally snapped his head up, glaring at me like I'd spit on him. "You're jealous?" he spat. "You've always been jealous of me, and now you're trying to make me look bad. But guess what, Mom and Dad? He only worked so hard because he was trying to compete with me. I pushed him. So, in a way, he owes this to me. That money is mine too." Then my mom chimed in, nodding furiously. "He's right, Sam. Your brother inspired you. Even if you don't see it, he deserves a share. It's only fair." "Fair?" I echoed, my voice rising. "Was it fair when you paid his rent while I was living on instant noodles? Was it fair when you bought him a house and told me to be responsible? Was it fair when you wiped out his debts but left me to drown in mine when I was just starting out? You've done everything for him and nothing for me. And now, after I finally build something on my own, you want to call it his?" My voice cracked on the last word, not from weakness, but from the sheer weight of finally saying out loud what I'd bottled up for decades. Daniel slammed his fist on the table. "I'm not asking for all of it, Sam. Just 15 million. You'll still have 10 left. That's more than enough for someone like you." "Someone like me?" I repeated slowly. "Yes," my mom hissed. "Someone who wouldn't even be here without this family's influence." I stared at her, completely stunned. "What influence? You didn't help me with anything. You didn't even know what I was doing." But she doubled down, leaning forward with burning eyes. "You grew up in this house. We gave you food, a roof, an education. You owe everything to us, and to your brother. If you think otherwise, you're just ungrateful." That word ungrateful hit me like a physical blow. I'd worked 3 jobs at once, slept in my car when rent was due, skipped doctor's appointments because I couldn't afford them, and they had the nerve to call me ungrateful. That's when my aunt finally lost it. "Are you all hearing yourselves?" she said. "Sam worked his tail off for years, and none of you even noticed. Now that he's successful, you think you're entitled to his money? It's disgusting." My mom whipped her head around. "Stay out of this, Margaret. You've always been jealous of our family." "Jealous?" my aunt scoffed. "Of what? Watching you spoil one child and ignore the other?" The room felt like a battlefield. Daniel's wife hurried the kids upstairs, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. My dad just kept drinking, his silence feeling like a betrayal all its own. Dinner was abandoned. Plates of food sat there, gravy congealing. Daniel muttered about how he'd never forgive me if I didn't share. My mom alternated between glaring at me and comforting him like he was the victim. Then came the final punch. My mom leaned across the table and whispered, harsh and loud, "If you don't give your brother what he deserves, you'll tear this family apart. Do you really want to be responsible for that?" The manipulation was so blatant, it was almost funny, but I didn't laugh. I just sat back, folded my arms, and stayed silent. My quiet seemed to infuriate her even more. For the next hour, the pressure mounted. My mom kept asking how I could live with myself if Daniel struggled while I hoarded money. Daniel sulked, throwing in comments like, "Enjoy your millions while your family starves." The man had a house and a steady job. He was nowhere near starving. Then my dad, who had barely spoken all night, muttered one sentence, "Maybe you should just give him something." "Sam, keep the peace." That was the moment I understood how deep the favoritism ran. Even with the truth laid bare, they still chose him. Always him. When I got up to leave, my mom made one last attempt. She grabbed my wrist at the door and said, "Think about what's right, Sam. Your brother's future depends on you now. Don't be selfish." I pulled my arm free, looked her in the eye, and said, "For once in my life, I'm going to be selfish." Then I walked out into the cold December night, my heart pounding, my ears ringing with their accusations. But the story didn't end there. That Christmas dinner was only the beginning. The fallout was about to get much, much worse. I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. My brother sobbing on the floor, demanding 15 million like it was his birthright. My mother screaming that I'd stolen his future. My father telling me to just give in. It all felt so surreal. I'd spent my entire adult life grinding, sacrificing, fighting for every bit of progress. And now that I'd made it, my own family acted like I'd committed a crime. By morning, I'd almost convinced myself that they'd wake up embarrassed. That emotions had just been running high. I was wrong. 2 days later, my mom called. "No, hello, no, how are you?" She got straight to the point. "Have you thought about what we said?" I knew what she meant, but I played dumb. About what? Don't play dumb, Sam. Your brother is under tremendous stress. He hasn't slept. He feels betrayed. We've always taught you that family comes first, and this is your chance to prove you believe that. My grip on the phone tightened. "So, let me get this straight. You expect me to hand over $15 million because Daniel cried about it? You make it sound so crude," she said sharply. "We're not asking for the world, just enough so Daniel can feel secure. He's always carried this family on his back, Sam. He's earned it." That nearly made me laugh out loud. Daniel, the brother whose debts were always paid, whose rent and mortgage were gifts, who couldn't manage a credit card, he had carried the family. I bit my tongue. "No, Mom, I'm not giving him anything." There was a pause, and then her voice dropped into something low and threatening. "You'll regret this, Sam. Mark my words. You can't turn your back on family without consequences." Then she hung up. I tried to brush it off as an empty threat, but I underestimated them. A week later, I logged into my business accounts and froze. Several large transfers had been attempted, all flagged for review. None had gone through, thank God, but my stomach sank when I saw the recipient, Daniel's personal account. I thought it was fraud at first, but the bank said the requests used security information that only someone close to me would know. And that's when it hit me. My brother, or maybe even my parents, had tried to steal from me. I called my mom immediately. "Did you or Daniel try to access my accounts?" Her silence said everything. Then, cool as ice, she said, "We were just making sure things were allocated fairly." "Allocated fairly?" I snapped. "That's not your money. You had no right." "Don't raise your voice at me," she said, sharp and commanding. "We did what needed to be done. Daniel is family. He deserves his share. And if you won't do the right thing, then we will." I didn't believe it. My own mother was openly admitting to attempted theft. "You realize this is illegal, right? You could go to prison for this. You wouldn't put your own family in prison," she said smugly. "Besides, who would believe you? You've always been bitter. If it comes down to it, we'll make sure everyone knows how selfish you really are." That stung. Not because it was true, but because I knew how easily they could twist the story. Daniel was the charming golden boy. I was the quiet one. Who would people believe? I hung up, feeling a betrayal so deep it was physical. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling. They had crossed a line. I never thought they would. It didn't stop there. Word started spreading through the extended family. I got messages from cousins and uncles I hadn't spoken to in years. "Hey, heard about your payday. Let's grab lunch." Or, "Your brother says you're being stubborn about helping family. That true?" My mom and Daniel were poisoning the well, painting me as the greedy villain, while poor Daniel suffered. They conveniently left out the house, the steady job, the years of handouts. The final straw came a few days later. I went to my parents' house unannounced, desperate for a confrontation. As I pulled into the driveway, saw a brand new luxury car parked out front. I didn't recognize it, but the dealer plate was still on. Inside, Daniel was sitting at the table, grinning, jangling the keys. "Nice ride, huh?" he said, smirking. Figured I deserved to treat myself. My blood ran cold. "How did you pay for that?" He leaned back, looking unbearably pleased with himself. "Family takes care of each other. Mom and Dad knew you'd come around eventually, so they helped me get a head start." I looked at my parents. My mom crossed her arms, defiant. My dad wouldn't meet my gaze. "You used my money," he said, my voice trembling. My mom didn't even flinch. "Consider it in advance. You'll understand one day." That was it. The breaking point. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about trust, respect, basic decency. They had taken what was mine without permission and saw nothing wrong with it. I stood there, fists clenched, heart hammering, staring at the people I'd once called family. And in that moment, something inside me shattered. There was no going back. What they didn't know was that I was already thinking several moves ahead. I remember standing in that dining room, watching the keys to Daniel's new car glint in his hand like a trophy he hadn't earned. My parents glared at me like I was the criminal. My chest felt so tight, I could barely breathe. This wasn't just betrayal, it was the end of something. But instead of rage, what washed over me was a deep, hollow emptiness. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I just turned and walked out. My footsteps felt heavy, like I was dragging chains. When I got to my car, I sat there for a long time, hands on the wheel, staring at the house. All the old memories flooded back, doing homework alone while my parents were at Daniel's games, the birthdays they forgot, the excuses they made whenever I needed help. And now, after I'd finally built a life for myself, they had the audacity to steal from me and call it fair. The weeks that followed were a blur. I stopped answering their calls. Every time my phone lit up with their names, my stomach turned. Daniel left voicemails in a tone of fake concern. "Hey, Sammy, just checking in. You know, you can't hold on to that money forever. Family shares, you know." He said it like he was the reasonable one. I was the problem. I avoided extended family too. The whispers were everywhere. A cousin messaged me, "Dude, why are you being so cold? Daniel says you're refusing to help the family after everything your parents did for you. After everything they did for me." What? Exactly. A roof over my head as a child? Meanwhile, Daniel got houses, tuition, bailouts, cars. Work, which had always been my escape, didn't feel safe anymore. I was constantly looking over my shoulder. I double-checked every account, added extra security, and barely slept. The exhaustion ate away at me. I stopped going out. I stopped seeing friends. I was too embarrassed to tell anyone what was happening. Who admits that their own family would stoop this low? One night, around 2 a.m., I found myself at my kitchen table with a notebook, writing down every slight, every instance of favoritism, every betrayal. It started as a mess of scribbles, but it slowly turned into something more organized, like a case file. Part of me was trying to make sense of it. Another part was quietly planning. The lowest point came when I bumped into an old friend, Josh, at a cafe. He hadn't heard the gossip. We chatted, and then he asked, "So, how's your family doing?" I froze. My mouth went dry. I almost said, "Good," out of habit, but instead, I just muttered, "Complicated." Josh smiled sympathetically. "Yeah, families are messy, but at the end of the day, they're all we've got, right?" I nodded, but inside I wanted to scream. The truth was, I didn't have a family anymore. They had chosen greed over me, again and again. That night, back in my apartment, I realized I was mourning them. I was mourning the parents who never really saw me, the brother who treated me like a rival, the idea of a family I never truly had. It was grief, plain and simple, but it came with a strange clarity. If they wanted to see me as the villain, fine. If they wanted to call me ungrateful, fine. I wasn't going to break myself trying to prove them wrong, but I also wasn't going to let them take what I had built. Slowly, I started taking small steps. I contacted a lawyer I trusted, a woman named Claire, who smelled like espresso and had a stare that could make anyone fidget. I told her everything: the demands, the attempted transfers, the theft. She listened carefully and then said, "Sam, you need to protect yourself, legally, financially, and personally." So, I did. I started moving assets into trusts they couldn't touch. I updated passwords, locked down accounts, installed extra verification layers. I even drafted documents to make it impossible for them to claim anything if something happened to me. It was tedious and heartbreaking, but it gave me a flicker of control. Emotionally, I was still at rock bottom. I stopped celebrating small wins. I lost weight. My apartment became a mess. Some mornings, I didn't want to get out of bed. Daniel's smug face haunted me. My mother's accusations echoed in my head. But beneath all that despair, a quiet ember was starting to burn. It was small and fragile, but it was there. Every time I thought about that luxury car, it glowed hotter. Every time I remembered my mom calling me selfish, it flared brighter. I didn't know how yet, but I knew this much. I wasn't going to stay at the bottom. They wanted me broken and compliant, but I wasn't that kid in the shadows anymore. I started to rise, not with big declarations, but with quiet, deliberate steps. I was planning, preparing, building something they couldn't touch. And one day, when the time was right, they would see just how much stronger I had become.